Emma Thompson stood in front of the mirror, her wedding dress perfect in every way. Her hands trembled as she touched her stomach, a secret joy spreading through her. She was pregnant. The news had come just this morning, and she couldn't wait to tell Michael after the ceremony. "Emma, you look beautiful," her sister Sarah exclaimed, entering the room. Emma smiled, pushing down the morning sickness. "Thanks, Sarah. Is everything ready?" "Almost. Michael's best man, James, is looking for him. Probably just pre-wedding jitters." Emma nodded, her own nerves fluttering. She dreamed of this day for so long, and now it was finally here. She and Michael would start their life together, with a baby on the way. It was perfect. As Sarah helped with the final touches, Emma's mind wandered to Michael. They'd been together for 5 years, and she couldn't imagine life without him. Sure, they'd had their ups and downs, but that's what made their love stronger, right? A knock on the door startled her. "Come in," Emma called, expecting to see her father ready to walk her down the aisle. Instead, James burst in, his face pale. "Emma, I need to talk to you." Sarah frowned. "James, what's going on? Where's Michael?" James looked at Emma, his eyes filled with guilt and fear. "He's gone. Michael's gone." The words hit Emma like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean gone?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "He left. We're leaving together." "I'm so sorry, Emma. We never meant for this to happen." The room spun around Emma. This couldn't be happening. Not today. Not when everything was supposed to be perfect. "You and Michael?" she managed to choke out. "How long?" James looked down, unable to meet her eyes. "A while. We tried to fight it, but..." Emma felt like she might throw up, and this time it wasn't the morning sickness. "Get out," she hissed. "Both of you, get out." Sarah put her arm around Emma as James fled the room. "Em, I'm so sorry. What do you want to do?" What did she want to do? She wanted to wake up from this nightmare. She wanted to walk down the aisle and marry the man she loved. She wanted to tell him about their baby. Instead, she collapsed onto the floor, her white dress pooling around her. Sobs racked her body as the reality of the situation sank in. Michael was gone. He'd left her for James, his best man, on their wedding day. The next few hours passed in a blur. Sarah helped Emma out of her dress while their mother informed the guests that the wedding was off. Emma could hear the murmurs and gasps from the other room, the pity in their voices as they speculated about what had happened. As evening fell, Emma sat alone in her childhood bedroom, still in shock. Her hand rested on her stomach, where their baby grew, unaware of the chaos around it. What was she going to do now? How could she raise a child alone? The thought of telling Michael about the baby crossed her mind, but she quickly pushed it away. He'd made his choice. He'd chosen James over her, over their life together. He didn't deserve to know about this child. As she stared out the window at the setting sun, Emma made a decision. She would keep this baby, raise it on her own. She would be strong for herself and for her child. Michael had broken her heart, shattered her dreams, but she wouldn't let him destroy her future. With tears streaming down her face, Emma whispered to her unborn child, "It's just you and me now, little one, but we'll be okay, I promise." The day that was supposed to be the happiest of her life had turned into a nightmare, but as Emma placed her hand protectively over her stomach, she felt a flicker of hope. This wasn't the end. It was a painful, unexpected beginning. The days following the failed wedding were a blur for Emma. She faced a barrage of questions from family and friends, each inquiry reopening the wound of Michael's betrayal. "I don't know why," became her standard response, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. Emma's parents hovered, their concern palpable. "Honey, you need to eat," her mother would say, placing plates of food that went untouched. Her father, usually stoic, watched her with worried eyes, unsure how to comfort his heartbroken daughter. At night, when the house fell quiet, Emma's thoughts turned dark. The life she had planned crumbled around her, leaving her feeling hollow. The baby, a secret she held close, became both a source of joy and terror. How could she raise a child alone? One evening, the weight of it all became too much. Emma found herself in the bathroom, staring at a bottle of sleeping pills. It would be so easy to make the pain stop. Her hand shook as she opened the bottle. A sudden wave of nausea hit her, a reminder of the life growing inside her. Emma dropped the pills, horrified by her moment of weakness. She couldn't do this. She had to be strong, for her baby. The next morning, Emma made a decision. She wouldn't tell anyone about the pregnancy, not yet. It was hers to protect, a secret that Michael didn't deserve to know. Meanwhile, in Seattle, Michael and James were trying to start over. They found an apartment far from the judging eyes of their hometown. But the guilt of what they'd done hung heavy between them. "We should have told her sooner," James said one night, unable to meet Michael's eyes. Michael nodded, his voice hollow. "I know. I keep thinking about her face when you told her. God, what have we done?" They tried to build a life together, but the foundation was shaky. Michael threw himself into his work, staying late at the architecture firm. James filled their apartment with plants, as if trying to grow roots in this new city. Back home, Emma's emotional state worsened. She barely ate, rarely left her room, and cried herself to sleep each night. Her family watched helplessly as she spiraled. It all came to a head when Emma fainted at work. She woke up in the hospital, a concerned doctor asking questions she couldn't answer. When the pregnancy was discovered, Emma broke down, the secret finally spilling out. "I can't do this," she sobbed to the nurse. "I'm all alone." The nurse, a kind-faced woman named Linda, took Emma's hand. "You're not alone, honey. There are people who want to help you." In the days that followed, Emma was surprised to find the nurse's words were true. Her co-workers brought meals and offered babysitting services. Her neighbor, an elderly woman she barely knew, knitted a tiny blanket for the baby. As Emma's due date approached, she found strength she didn't know she had. She started attending therapy, facing her depression head-on. She read parenting books, prepared the nursery, and slowly began to imagine a future for herself and her child. One evening, as Emma sat in the nursery rubbing her swollen belly, she felt a kick. A small smile, the first in months, crossed her face. "We're gonna be okay, little one," she whispered. "Mommy's got you." In Seattle, Michael stared at a photo of Emma he couldn't bring himself to delete. The guilt gnawed at him, a constant reminder of the pain he'd caused. James found him like that, lost in thought. "We can't change the past," James said softly, "but we can try to be better." Michael nodded, putting the phone away. They had made their choice, for better or worse. Now they had to live with it. As Emma's community rallied around her, she began to see a path forward. It wasn't the life she had planned, but it was a life filled with love, for her child and for herself. She would face the future one day at a time, stronger than she ever thought possible. The baby kicked again, as if in agreement. Emma smiled, feeling hope for the first time since that fateful wedding day. Whatever came next, she was ready to face it. Emma's water broke 2 weeks early, catching her off guard. She rushed to the hospital, fear and excitement battling within her. The labor was long and difficult, with complications arising that put both Emma and the baby at risk. "We need to perform an emergency C-section," the doctor announced, his voice urgent. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Just save my baby," she pleaded. Hours later, Emma woke to the sound of a tiny cry. A nurse placed a small bundle in her arms. "Congratulations," she said softly. "You have a son." Emma looked down at her baby boy, overcome with love. "Hello, Ethan," she whispered, the name she'd chosen months ago, finally belonging to this perfect little person. The first few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and diaper changes. Emma was exhausted but happier than she'd been in months. Ethan became her world, giving her a sense of purpose she'd been missing. As Ethan grew, Emma decided it was time to focus on herself too. She started therapy, working through the pain of Michael's betrayal and her fears about single motherhood. "Have you thought about telling Michael about Ethan?" her therapist asked during one session. Emma shook her head. "He made his choice. Ethan is mine." But the question lingered. One night, unable to sleep, Emma sat down and wrote a letter to Michael. She poured out her heart, telling him about their son, about the joy and challenges of motherhood. When she finished, she folded the letter and tucked it away in a drawer, unsent. Meanwhile, in Seattle, Michael was building his career as an architect. He threw himself into his work, trying to ignore the gnawing guilt that never seemed to fade. "You need to forgive yourself," James told him one night. "We can't change the past." Michael nodded, but the words rang hollow. He'd started having vivid dreams about a child he'd never met, waking up with a sense of loss he couldn't explain. As Ethan turned 1, Emma made a decision. She enrolled in psychology classes at the local community college. Balancing school and motherhood was challenging, but Emma found she had a passion for understanding the human mind. "You're really good at this," her professor commented after Emma gave a presentation on childhood trauma. "Have you considered making this your career?" The idea took root, giving Emma a new goal to work toward. Back in Seattle, Michael and James were struggling. The excitement of their new life had faded, replaced by the reality of building a relationship on a foundation of secrets and guilt. "Maybe we made a mistake," James said during one particularly heated argument. Michael felt his heart sink. "Do you want to leave?" James sighed, deflating. "No. I wish we'd done things differently." They decided to try couples therapy, working to rebuild trust and move forward. As Ethan approached his 2nd birthday, he developed a persistent cough. Emma took him to the pediatrician, worry gnawing at her. "It's just asthma," the doctor reassured her. "We'll get him on an inhaler and he'll be fine." Emma nodded, relief washing over her. But as she watched Ethan use his inhaler, a memory surfaced. Michael had asthma as a child too. The realization hit her hard, a reminder of the connection her son would always have to the father he'd never met. That night, Emma pulled out the letter she'd written to Michael. She reread it, tears falling onto the paper. For a moment, she considered sending it, but in the end, she put it back in the drawer. Ethan was thriving, and she was building a life for them. The past was better left in the past. As Emma tucked Ethan into bed that night, she felt a surge of love and pride. They'd come so far, just the two of them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew they could face them together. In Seattle, Michael woke from another dream about the child he'd never met. He sat up in bed, a feeling of loss washing over him. James stirred beside him. "Another nightmare?" James asked sleepily. Michael shook his head. No, not a nightmare. Just a feeling that I'm missing something important. James reached out, taking Michael's hand. They'd made it through a rough patch, but challenges still lay ahead. As they drifted back to sleep, neither of them could have imagined how their lives would intersect with Emma's again, or the changes that were yet to come. 5 years flew by in a blink. Emma stood in front of her new office, the words Emma Thompson, licensed therapist, freshly painted on the door. She took a deep breath, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. You've got this, Mom, Ethan said, squeezing her hand. At 7 years old, he was growing into a thoughtful, curious boy. Emma smiled down at him. Thanks, sweetie. Ready for your first day of second grade? As she dropped Ethan off at school, Emma couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. He was growing up so fast, and lately, his questions about his father had become more frequent and insistent. Why don't I have a dad like Tommy? He'd asked just the other day. Emma had fumbled for an answer, not ready to reveal the whole truth. Some families are different, honey. Ours is special because it's just you and me. The answer hadn't satisfied Ethan, and Emma knew tougher conversations lay ahead. Meanwhile, in Seattle, Michael and James were embarking on a new adventure of their own. They stood in the adoption agency, nervous energy radiating between them. Mr. Anderson, Mr. Carter, the social worker called. I'd like you to meet Sophie. A little girl with bright eyes and a shy smile peeked out from behind the social worker. Michael felt his heart melt. Hi, Sophie, James said gently. We've been waiting to meet you. What the couple didn't know was that Sophie had cerebral palsy. The diagnosis came as a shock, but Michael and James were determined to give her the best life possible. We can do this, Michael said one night, after a particularly challenging day of physical therapy with Sophie. She needs us. James nodded, pulling Michael close. We're a family now. We'll figure it out together. Back in their hometown, Emma was thriving in her new career. She found fulfillment in helping others work through their emotional struggles. But her personal life was a different story. You should try dating, her friend Sarah suggested over coffee. It's been years, Em. Reluctantly, Emma agreed to a blind date. But as she sat across from the perfectly nice man at dinner, she felt nothing. The evening ended awkwardly, leaving Emma wondering if she'd ever be able to open her heart again. As weeks passed, Ethan's behavior began to change. He became moody and argumentative, acting out at school. Mrs. Thompson, we're concerned about Ethan, his teacher said during a parent-teacher conference. He's been getting into fights with other children, especially those with fathers. Emma felt a wave of guilt wash over her. Was her decision to keep Michael out of Ethan's life causing more harm than good? In Seattle, Michael and James were facing their own challenges with Sophie. Her needs were more complex than they'd anticipated, testing their patience and their relationship. I don't know if I can do this, James admitted one night, exhaustion clear in his voice. Michael took his hand. We're in this together, remember? Sophie needs us. We can't give up. The couple redoubled their efforts, attending support groups and learning everything they could about Sophie's condition. Slowly, they found their footing as parents. One evening, as Emma was cleaning out her closet, she came across a box she'd forgotten about. Inside were mementos from her wedding day, her veil, dried flowers, even the letter she'd written to Michael years ago. Emma sat on the floor, surrounded by these remnants of her past. She'd thought she'd moved on, but the ache in her chest told a different story. Just then, Ethan walked in. Mom, what's all this stuff? Emma looked up, torn between hiding everything and finally telling her son the truth. Ethan, honey, I think it's time we talked about your father. As Emma began to share the story she'd kept hidden for so long, she realized that moving forward might mean confronting the past she tried so hard to leave behind. In Seattle, Michael woke from another vivid dream about a child he'd never met. He looked over at James and Sophie, sleeping peacefully beside him, and felt a conflicting mix of love for his family and an inexplicable sense of loss. Little did any of them know that their separate lives were on a collision course, set to intersect in ways none of them could have imagined. 10 years had passed since the day Emma's world shattered. Life had settled into a comfortable routine, but everything was about to change. Michael stared out the car window as they entered their hometown. Maybe this was a mistake, he said, gripping the armrests of his wheelchair. James squeezed his shoulder. It's a great opportunity, Michael. The hospital needs you. Michael nodded, trying to quell his anxiety. He'd accepted a position to design a new wing for the local hospital, never imagining Emma might work there. As they drove past familiar streets, memories flooded back. Michael's stomach churned. What if we see her? We'll deal with it, James assured him. We're here for your career and Sophie's treatment. That's what matters. At the hospital, Emma hurried through the lobby, late for a meeting. She rounded a corner and nearly collided with a man in a wheelchair. I'm so sorry, she exclaimed, then froze. The man looked familiar, but before she could place him, he wheeled away quickly. Emma shook off the strange feeling and continued to her meeting. Little did she know how close she'd come to confronting her past. Days passed. Michael threw himself into the project, while James focused on Sophie's appointments. They managed to avoid running into anyone they knew, but the fear of discovery hung over them. One afternoon, Emma took Ethan to the mall for new school shoes. As they walked past the food court, Emma's heart stopped. There at a table sat Michael and James. Time seemed to slow. Emma couldn't breathe. Michael looked up, their eyes meeting across the crowded space. Recognition, shock, and a flood of emotions passed between them. Ethan tugged at Emma's sleeve. "Mom? What's wrong?" His voice snapped Emma back to reality. She grabbed Ethan's hand and hurried away, her mind reeling. Michael watched them go, his heart pounding. "James," he whispered. "It's Emma. She has a son." James turned, catching a glimpse of Emma's retreating form. "Oh God," he muttered. "What do we do?" Michael shook his head, overwhelmed. I don't know. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. Seeing Michael had unleashed a torrent of emotions she thought she'd dealt with long ago. Anger, hurt, and confusion warred within her. Worse, she couldn't shake the realization that her heart had skipped a beat when their eyes met. Did she still have feelings for him after all this time? Ethan's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Lon? Who was that man at the mall? You looked scared." Emma sighed. How could she explain? "He's someone I used to know, honey. It was just surprising to see him." Ethan frowned. "He looked at you funny, and I felt weird, like I knew him too. Is he my dad?" The question hit Emma like a punch to the gut. "No, sweetie. He's not your dad. It's complicated. Let's talk about it another time, okay?" As Ethan nodded and left the room, Emma felt the weight of her secrets pressing down on her. How long could she keep the truth from her son? Meanwhile, Michael and James argued in their hotel room. "We should leave," James insisted. "This is too risky." Michael shook his head. "I can't just abandon the project, and Sophie needs her treatments." "And what about Emma? What if she tells people about us?" Michael sighed. "She won't. Emma's not like that." James scoffed. "You don't know her anymore. It's been 10 years. The truth of those words hung heavy between them. The next day, Emma found herself distracted at work. She kept replaying the mall encounter in her mind. Why was Michael in a wheelchair? What were they doing back in town? As she walked to her car that evening, she spotted James waiting by the hospital entrance. Their eyes met, and James approached hesitantly. "Emma," he said softly. "Can we talk?" Emma's heart raced. She wanted to run to avoid this conversation, but she stood her ground. "What's there to talk about, James?" James took a deep breath. "A lot has changed. Michael, he had an accident. He saved a little girl from being hit by a car, but he was injured. He's paralyzed now." The news hit Emma hard. Despite everything, she felt a pang of sympathy for Michael. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said stiffly. "But why are you telling me this?" James looked at her pleadingly. "We're here for a while. Michael's designing the new hospital wing. I hoped we could clear the air for everyone's sake." Emma felt torn. Part of her wanted answers, closure. Another part wanted to protect herself and Ethan from more pain. Before she could respond, she saw Michael wheeling toward them. Their eyes met again, and Emma felt that same jolt of electricity. In that moment, Emma realized that no matter how much time had passed, her feelings for Michael were far from resolved. And now, with him back in town, she would have to confront the past she'd tried so hard to leave behind. Emma stood frozen, watching Michael approach. The tension was palpable as he joined them. "Emma," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's been a long time." Before Emma could respond, James spoke up. "Emma, please, we need to talk. Can we go somewhere private?" Reluctantly, Emma nodded. They moved to a quiet corner of the hospital garden. James took a deep breath. "Emma, I know we hurt you. I'm so sorry. If I could go back and change things, I would." Emma felt her anger rising. "You're sorry? Do you have any idea what you two did to me?" Michael looked away. Guilt etched on his face. "We were cowards," he admitted. "We should have been honest from the beginning." As Emma opened her mouth to reply, she heard a familiar voice. "Mom?" Her heart stopped. Ethan was walking towards them, confusion clear on his face. Michael's eyes widened as he looked at the boy. The resemblance was undeniable. "Ethan," Emma said, her voice shaking. "What are you doing here?" "Grandma dropped me off. She had an appointment." Ethan's eyes darted between the three adults. "Who are they, Mom?" The world seemed to stand still. Emma saw the realization dawning on Michael's face. "Emma," Michael said, his voice barely audible. Is he mine?" Emma couldn't speak. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. Michael's breath came in short gasps. "I have a son? How? Why didn't you tell me?" James put a hand on Michael's shoulder, looking shocked himself. Emma found her voice. "You left me, Michael. You left me on our wedding day. I found out I was pregnant that morning. I was going to tell you after the ceremony." Michael's face went pale. He gripped the arms of his wheelchair, struggling to breathe. "Michael, calm down," James said, recognizing the signs of a panic attack. Ethan looked scared. "Mom, what's going on? Who is he?" Emma knelt beside her son, her heart breaking. "Ethan, honey, this is your father." Ethan's eyes went wide. He looked at Michael, then back at Emma. "But you said—" "I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. I should have told you the truth." Michael was shaking now, tears streaming down his face. "I have a son," he repeated, as if trying to make it real. "I have a 10-year-old son I never knew about." James looked torn, unsure whether to comfort Michael or give the family space. Emma felt a whirlwind of emotions: anger at having to reveal the truth like this, compassion for Michael's obvious distress, fear of what this meant for her and Ethan's future. Why? Michael finally managed to ask. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Emma took a deep breath. "At first, I was too hurt. Then as time passed, it just seemed easier to keep it a secret. I convinced myself you didn't deserve to know." Michael nodded slowly, processing her words. "I understand," he said softly. "I don't blame you. What I did, it was unforgivable." Ethan, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. "So you left my mom? Why?" The simple question cut through the tension. Michael looked at his son, seeing himself in the boy's features. "I made a terrible mistake," Michael said. "I was scared and confused. But that's no excuse. I hurt your mother deeply, and I've regretted it every day since." James, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Emma, I know we have no right to ask anything of you, but please, for Ethan's sake, can we talk about this? Figure out where we go from here?" Emma looked at her son, seeing the confusion and hurt in his eyes. She knew she couldn't protect him from the truth anymore. "Okay," she said quietly. "We'll talk. But not here, not now. This is too much to process all at once." Michael nodded, still looking shell-shocked. "Thank you, Emma. I know I don't deserve a chance, but I want to make things right. For Ethan." As they made plans to meet later, Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The secret she'd carried for so long was finally out. But as she watched Michael and Ethan look at each other, studying their shared features, she realized this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with difficult conversations and emotional revelations. For now, all she could do was hold Ethan close and promise him that no matter what happened, she would always be there for him. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Emma felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could all find a way forward together. A week after the shocking revelation, Emma found herself rushing through the hospital corridors. She was late for a meeting when she collided with a tall man in scrubs. "I'm so sorry," Emma apologized, gathering her dropped papers. "No harm done," the man said, helping her. Their eyes met, and he smiled. "I'm Nathan, new pediatric surgeon." "Emma," she replied, feeling a flutter in her stomach. "I'm a therapist here." They chatted briefly before Emma remembered her meeting. As she hurried away, she couldn't help but feel a spark of interest. Later that day, Emma received a call from Michael. "Emma, I know I have no right to ask, but please, can I meet Ethan properly? I want to be part of his life." Emma sighed, conflicted. "Michael, it's not that simple. Ethan's confused and hurt. We can't just pretend the past didn't happen." "I know," Michael said, his voice pained. "But I want to try, to make amends." Emma agreed to think about it, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. The next day, Emma bumped into Nathan again. This time, he was comforting a crying child. "You're great with kids," Emma observed. Nathan smiled sadly. "I lost my daughter 2 years ago. Cancer. It's why I became a pediatric surgeon." Emma felt a connection, recognizing the pain in his eyes. They agreed to have coffee, talking for hours about their experiences. As days passed, Emma found herself drawn to Nathan. But fear held her back. Opening her heart seemed terrifying after everything she'd been through. Meanwhile, Michael struggled with his desire to know Ethan. He and James argued about it constantly. "You can't just walk into his life and expect everything to be okay," James said. "He's my son, James. I have to try." Michael insisted. Ethan, caught in the middle, experienced a roller coaster of emotions. One moment he was curious about Michael. The next he was angry at the years of absence. "Why does he want to know me now?" Ethan asked Emma one night. Emma hugged him tight. "People make mistakes, honey, but they can also change." A week later, Emma received unexpected news. Sophie, Michael and James' daughter, needed a complex surgery. The hospital staff recommended Emma as the best therapist to help with Sophie's recovery. Emma felt torn. Working with Sophie meant being involved in Michael and James's lives, but she couldn't deny a child help. She agreed to meet Sophie, instantly charmed by the bright-eyed girl. As Emma explained the therapy process to Michael and James, she saw their devotion to their daughter. "Thank you for doing this," Michael said softly. Emma nodded, pushing aside her conflicted feelings. As Emma left the meeting, she ran into Nathan. Seeing her distress, he suggested they grab dinner. Over pasta, Emma opened up about her complicated situation. Nathan listened without judgment, offering support. "Life's messy," he said, "but you're strong, Emma. You'll figure it out." Emma felt a warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time in years, she considered the possibility of letting someone in. But just as things were looking up, a complication arose. Emma discovered that Sophie's surgery was riskier than initially thought. The news hit Michael and James hard. "What if something goes wrong?" James asked, his voice breaking. Emma found herself comforting them despite their history. She realized that, despite everything, she still cared. That night, Emma met Nathan for coffee. As they talked, he revealed more about his past. "Losing my daughter broke me," he admitted. "I pushed everyone away, including my wife. We divorced a year later." Emma saw her own fears reflected in his story. "I'm scared of getting hurt again," she confessed. Nathan took her hand. "Me too. but maybe we're stronger together. Their moment was interrupted by a call from Michael. Emma, I know it's a lot to ask, but please, can we arrange a meeting with Ethan? I promise to follow your lead. Emma closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. She looked at Nathan, drawing strength from his presence. Okay, Michael, she said finally. We'll try. For Ethan's sake. As she hung up, Emma realized she was at a crossroads. The past and present were colliding, forcing her to confront her fears and make difficult choices. But looking at Nathan, she felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she didn't have to face them alone. Emma paced nervously in her living room, waiting for Michael to arrive. She had finally agreed to let him meet Ethan, but her stomach was in knots. Mom, relax, Ethan said, trying to sound brave. It's just a meeting, right? Emma nodded, amazed at her son's maturity. That's right, honey. And remember, you can end it any time you want. The doorbell rang. Emma took a deep breath and opened the door. Michael sat in his wheelchair, the doc looking as nervous as she felt. Hi, he said softly. Thank you for this. Emma led him to the living room where Ethan waited. The boy's eyes widened as he saw Michael, recognition and confusion crossing his face. Ethan, Michael said, his voice shaking. It's good to meet you. Ethan stood stiffly, not responding. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Maybe we could talk about your interests? Michael tried. Emma mentioned you like soccer. Suddenly, Ethan exploded. Why do you care? Where were you all these years? Michael flinched. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I made terrible mistakes. Save it, Ethan snapped. I don't want to hear your excuses. He stormed out of the room. Emma's heart broke, seeing the pain on both their faces. I'll talk to him, she said to Michael. She found Ethan in his room, crying. Oh, honey, she said, holding him close. Why did he come back now? Ethan sobbed. We were fine without him. Emma stroked his hair. People make mistakes, Ethan, but they can also change. Your father is trying. Ethan looked up at her. I know, he admitted. I've been researching him online. I know about the accident, how he saved that little girl. Emma was shocked. You knew about him? Ethan nodded. I was curious, but I'm still angry. Emma hugged him tighter. That's okay. You're allowed to feel angry, but maybe give him a chance. Meanwhile, Emma's work with Sophie was going well. The little girl's determination inspired her. You're amazing with her, James commented one day. Emma smiled. She's a fighter. You and Michael have done a great job. As she said this, Nathan walked by. He frowned slightly, seeing Emma with James. Later, Nathan confronted Emma. You seem awfully friendly with your ex's partner. Emma was taken aback. We're just working together for Sophie. Nothing more. Nathan sighed. I'm sorry. It's just seeing you with them. I can't help but worry. Emma took his hand. Nathan, you have nothing to worry about. What Michael and I had is in the past. Nathan nodded, but Emma could see the doubt in his eyes. As weeks passed, Ethan slowly began to open up to Michael. They had short, awkward meetings, but progress was being made. One day, after a session with Sophie, Emma overheard Michael and James arguing. You're spending too much time with them, James said. What about us? About Sophie? They're my family too, Michael replied. Emma quickly walked away, conflicted. She hadn't realized how her involvement was affecting Michael and James's relationship. That evening, Emma met Nathan for dinner. As they talked, he revealed something surprising. I knew Michael in college, Nathan said. We were in the same fraternity. Emma was shocked. You never mentioned this. Nathan looked uncomfortable. I didn't know how to bring it up. Michael, he wasn't a great guy back then, always chasing girls, breaking hearts. Emma felt a rush of old pain. He broke mine too, she said softly. Nathan took her hand. I'm sorry, I should have told you sooner. I was afraid it might change things between us. Emma squeezed his hand. It doesn't, but no more secrets, okay? As they continued talking, Emma realized how complicated everything had become. She was balancing her growing feelings for Nathan, her commitment to Sophie's care, and the delicate situation with Michael and Ethan. Later that night, Emma called Michael. We need to talk about boundaries, she said. This situation is affecting everyone, including James and Sophie. Michael was quiet for a moment. You're right, he finally said. I got caught up in wanting to know Ethan. I need to find a balance. As Emma hung up, she felt a mix of emotions. She was proud of the progress they'd made, but knew there were still challenges ahead. Ethan knocked on her door. Mom, can we talk about Dad? Emma smiled, realizing Ethan had called Michael Dad for the first time. Of course, honey, what's on your mind? As they talked, Emma knew they were entering a new phase. The road ahead would be difficult, but they were facing it together. As Sophie's surgery date approached, tensions ran high among everyone involved. Emma found herself caught in the middle, trying to balance her professional responsibilities with her personal feelings. One evening, while discussing Sophie's post-surgery care plan, Emma and Michael found themselves alone in the hospital cafeteria. You've been amazing with Sophie, Michael said softly. Thank you. Emma nodded, feeling uncomfortable with his gratitude. It's my job, Michael. Michael hesitated, then spoke. Emma, I know I have no right to ask, but do you ever think about what might have been if I hadn't? Don't, Emma interrupted sharply. We can't go down that road. Michael persisted. I've changed, Emma. I'm not that person anymore. Something in Emma snapped. Years of repressed anger bubbled to the surface. Changed? You left me at the altar, Michael. You have no idea what I went through. Michael flinched at her words. I know, and I'm sorry. I've regretted it every day. Sorry doesn't erase the pain, Emma said, her voice shaking. It doesn't change the fact that Ethan grew up without a father. Their argument escalated, years of unresolved emotions pouring out. Neither noticed Nathan approaching until he spoke. Everything okay here? Nathan asked, his tone concerned. Emma stepped back, suddenly aware of their audience. It's fine, we're done here. As she walked away, Nathan followed. Emma, wait. We need to talk. They found a quiet corner. Nathan took a deep breath. Emma, I care about you, a lot, but I need to know where I stand. Do you still have feelings for Michael? Emma felt her heart racing. Nathan, Before she could finish, her phone rang. It was Ethan's school. He hadn't shown up for class. Panic set in as Emma rushed home, finding Ethan's room empty. A note on his bed read, I need time to think, don't worry. Emma called Michael, her voice frantic. Ethan's missing. He ran away. Michael arrived quickly, James by his side. As they organized a search, tensions flared again. This is your fault, James snapped at Michael. If you hadn't come back into their lives, that's enough, Emma interrupted. Blaming each other won't help find Ethan. Hours passed as they searched. Emma's mind raced with worst-case scenarios. Finally, her phone rang. It was Ethan. Mom, I'm okay. I'm at Grandma's, he said quietly. Relief washed over Emma. She relayed the news to Michael and James, then drove to pick up Ethan. In the car ride home, Ethan opened up. I'm sorry I scared you. I feel so confused. About Dad, about everything. Emma hugged him tight. It's okay to be confused, honey. We'll figure this out together. When they arrived home, Michael was waiting. Seeing Ethan, he wheeled forward. Son, I was so worried. To everyone's surprise, Ethan hugged Michael. I'm sorry, Dad. The moment was interrupted by Nathan's arrival. Emma, can we talk? Emma nodded, leading Nathan to the porch. Before she could speak, Nathan took her hands. Emma, I love you, he said. But I need to know if you feel the same. If there's any part of you that still loves Michael, I need to know now. Emma felt tears forming. Nathan, I care about you so much, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't have unresolved feelings for Michael. Nathan nodded sadly. I thought so. I think I need some time. Has Nathan left? Emma felt her world spinning. She turned to find Michael watching her. Emma, he said softly, there's something I need to tell you. The accident. It wasn't just an accident. Emma frowned. What do you mean? Michael took a deep breath. I was in a dark place. The guilt of what I'd done to you. I couldn't live with it. I stepped in front of that car on purpose. Emma gasped, shocked by his confession. Michael, I had no idea. Saving that little girl, it saved me too, Michael continued. It made me realize I wanted to live, to make amends. Emma felt overwhelmed. All the emotions she'd suppressed for years came flooding back. I never stopped loving you, she whispered, surprised by her own admission. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Neither knew what to say next. Inside, James watched the scene unfold, feeling like an outsider. He loved Michael, but seeing him with Emma and Ethan made him question everything. As night fell, everyone retreated to process the day's events. Emma lay awake, her mind racing. She'd admitted she still loved Michael, but did that change anything? And what about Nathan? Sophie's surgery was days away. Emma knew she needed to focus on that, but her personal life was in chaos. She'd have to make some difficult decisions soon, decisions that would affect not just her, but Ethan, Michael, James, Sophie, and Nathan. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Emma realized that no matter what happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The morning of Sophie's surgery arrived, bringing with it a palpable tension. Emma, Michael, James, and Ethan gathered in the hospital waiting room, each lost in their own thoughts. As Sophie was wheeled into the operating room, James broke down. Michael held him close, whispering words of comfort. Emma watched, her heart aching for them both. Hours passed. The tension in the room grew with each tick of the clock. Ethan, sensing the adults' distress, tried to lighten the mood with jokes, but his efforts fell flat. Suddenly, a nurse burst into the room. There's been a complication, she announced. The doctor needs to speak with you immediately. James collapsed into Michael's arms, sobbing. Emma felt her world spinning. This couldn't be happening. The doctor explained that Sophie's heart had stopped during the procedure. They had managed to revive her, but the next few hours were critical. As they waited for news, the gravity of the situation broke down the walls between them all. Emma found herself sitting next to Michael. I'm scared, she admitted. Michael took her hand. Me too, he whispered. Emma, if anything happens to Sophie, I don't know if I can... Don't, Emma interrupted. She's going to be okay. She has to be. In that moment of shared vulnerability, Emma felt the last of her resentment towards Michael melt away. She saw not the man who had hurt her, but a father terrified for his daughter. Across the room, Ethan approached James, who sat alone, staring blankly at the wall. Hey, Ethan said softly. Want to play a game on my phone? It might help pass the time. James looked up, surprised by the offer. Sure, kid. Thanks. As they played, James opened up to Ethan about his fears and doubts. Ethan listened, offering simple but profound words of comfort. A bond formed between them, unexpected but genuine. Hours passed. Nathan arrived, having heard about Sophie's complications. He found Emma and Michael sitting together, hands still clasped. "Emma," he said, his voice tight, "can we talk?" They stepped into the hallway. Nathan took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I care about you, Emma, but I can see now that your heart belongs to someone else." Emma felt tears welling up. "Nathan, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." Nathan nodded, his eyes sad but understanding. "I know. Take care of yourself, Emma, and that little girl in there." As Nathan walked away, Emma felt a mix of sadness and relief. She returned to the waiting room where Michael was talking to Ethan. "I want you to know," Michael was saying, "that no matter what happens with Sophie or with your mom and me, you're my son. I love you, and I'm sorry for all the years I missed." Ethan hugged his father tightly. "I love you too, Dad." Emma watched the scene, her heart full. She realized that she had finally found the strength to forgive, not just Michael and James, but herself as well. As the night wore on, the emotional intensity brought out final confessions. James admitted to Michael that he had considered leaving when things got tough with Sophie's condition. "I was scared I wasn't strong enough," he confessed. Michael revealed that his accident had made him realize the true meaning of family and love. "I've been trying to make up for my mistakes ever since," he said. Emma shared that she had almost reached out to Michael many times over the years. "I was too afraid of being hurt again," she admitted. Ethan, listening to the adults, began to understand the complexities of love, forgiveness, and family. As dawn broke, the doctor entered the waiting room. Everyone held their breath, fearing the worst. "Sophie's surgery was successful," he announced. "She's going to need extensive therapy, but she's going to be okay." The room erupted in tears and hugs. In that moment of shared joy and relief, all the tensions and conflicts of the past seemed to fade away. As they gathered around Sophie's bed later that day, watching her sleep peacefully, Emma looked at the faces around her. Michael, James, Ethan. They had all been through so much together. She realized that family wasn't always what you expected it to be. It could be messy, complicated, and unexpected. But it could also be beautiful, resilient, and full of love. As Sophie opened her eyes and smiled weakly at them all, Emma knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The journey had been difficult, but it had led them here to a moment of unity, forgiveness, and hope for the future. In the weeks following Sophie's surgery, her recovery surprised everyone. Her determination and resilience brought the unconventional family closer together in ways they never expected. Emma found herself spending more time at Michael and James' house, helping with Sophie's therapy. One afternoon, she watched as Ethan and Sophie played together in the living room. "Ethan, can you help me with this puzzle?" Sophie asked, her voice still weak but determined. Ethan smiled, sitting down next to his half-sister. "Sure, Soph. Let's start with the corners, okay?" Emma leaned against the doorframe, her heart swelling with pride at Ethan's gentleness. Michael wheeled up beside her. "They're pretty amazing together, aren't they?" Emma nodded. "I never thought I'd see this day," she admitted. "Ethan with a sister, you and James, all of us together like this." Michael reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Life has a funny way of working out sometimes." That evening, after Sophie had gone to bed and James was working late at the hospital, Emma and Michael found themselves alone on the porch. The night was cool, crickets chirping softly in the background. "I've been thinking a lot about us," Emma said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. "About the past and the future." Michael turned to face her, his eyes hopeful but cautious. "And," he prompted gently. Emma took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I can't deny that I still have feelings for you, Michael. But so much has changed. We've both changed." Michael nodded, understanding in his gaze. "I know. I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. Neither are you." "Exactly," Emma agreed. "And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We've grown, learned from our mistakes." "I understand if you don't want to pursue anything romantic," Michael said, his voice soft. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I just want to be in your life and in Ethan's life, in whatever way you'll allow." Emma smiled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "I'd like that. And I think Ethan would too. He's really bonded with you and Sophie these past few weeks." They sat in silence for a moment, letting the implications of their conversation settle. "So where do we go from here?" Michael finally asked. Emma turned to him, her expression serious but warm. "I think we take it slow, focus on co-parenting Ethan and supporting Sophie's recovery. See where things lead naturally." Michael nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "I like the sound of that." The next day, Emma sat down with James to discuss the new family dynamic. She found him in the kitchen, preparing Sophie's medication. "James, do you have a minute to talk?" Emma asked hesitantly. James looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Sure, Emma. What's on your mind?" Emma took a seat at the kitchen island. "I wanted to talk about Michael, Ethan, and, well, all of us, really." James set down the medicine bottle, giving Emma his full attention. "Okay, I'm listening." "I know this situation isn't conventional," Emma began, "and I want you to know that I respect your relationship with Michael. I'm not trying to come between you two." James nodded slowly. I appreciate that, Emma. To be honest, I've been worried about where I fit in all of this. Emma reached out, placing her hand on James's arm. You're Sophie's father. You're Michael's partner, and if you're open to it, I think you could be an important part of Ethan's life too. James' eyes widened. Really? You'd be okay with that? Emma smiled. More than okay. Ethan needs all the love and support he can get, and I've seen how great you are with him. James let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Thank you, Emma. That means a lot to me. As the days passed, the unconventional family settled into a new rhythm. Ethan spent weekends at Michael and James's house, forming a special bond with Sophie. One Saturday morning, Emma arrived to find Ethan teaching Sophie how to play chess. Okay, Soph, remember how the knight moves? Ethan asked patiently. Sophie furrowed her brow in concentration. Like an L, right? That's right, Ethan exclaimed, high-fiving his sister. You're getting really good at this. Emma watched from the doorway, her heart full. You're really good with her, she observed, making her presence known. Ethan looked up, shrugging with a smile. She's my sister. That's what big brothers do, right? Emma felt tears prick her eyes. Right, she agreed softly. Later that day, Emma found herself in the study, flipping through an old journal. Michael knocked on the open door, wheeling himself in. What's that? He asked, nodding towards the journal. Emma held it up. Just some old writing of mine. I used to dream of being an author, you know. Michael's eyes lit up. I remember, you were always scribbling away in notebooks. Have you thought about picking it up again? Emma hesitated. I don't know. It's been so long. Why not give it a try? Michael encouraged. Your story, our story, it's pretty incredible. It might help people. The idea took root in Emma's mind. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, she sat at her desk and began to write. The words flowed easily, her experiences pouring onto the page. Weeks turned into months. Emma's book began to take shape, chronicling their journey of love, loss, and redemption. One evening, she nervously shared a chapter with Michael and James. Well? She asked as they finished reading. Be honest. Michael and James exchanged a look. Emma, Michael began, this is incredible. James nodded in agreement. It's raw, honest, and beautiful. You should publish this. Emma felt a flutter of excitement. You really think so? Absolutely, Michael affirmed. Your story could help so many people. Encouraged by their support, Emma decided to pursue publication. To her surprise and delight, her book resonated with readers around the world. Letters poured in from people sharing their own stories of unconventional families and second chances. One afternoon, as Emma sorted through the latest batch of fan mail, she came across a letter that moved her to tears. It was from a young woman who had been abandoned by her father, just like Ethan. Your book gave me hope. The letter read, It made me believe that forgiveness is possible, that families can heal and grow in unexpected ways. Thank you for sharing your story. Inspired by the response to her book, Emma approached Michael and James with an idea. I've been thinking, she began, what if we started a foundation to support and advocate for non-traditional families? Michael's face lit up. That's brilliant, Emma. We could help so many people. James nodded enthusiastically. Count me in. I think we all know firsthand how important support can be in these situations. And so the Thompson Anderson Family Foundation was born. Its mission, to provide resources, counseling, and community for families that didn't fit the traditional mold. Months of planning culminated in the foundation's launch event. Emma stood at the podium looking out at the gathered crowd. Ethan sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Sophie, now walking with the help of a cane, sat beside him. Michael and James flanked them, a picture of unity. Emma took a deep breath and began her speech. 10 years ago, I thought my life was over. I'd been left at the altar, pregnant and alone. I never could have imagined that one day I'd be standing here, surrounded by the most beautiful, unconventional family I could ask for. She paused, her eyes finding Ethan's in the crowd. He gave her an encouraging nod. Our journey hasn't been easy, Emma continued. We've faced heartbreak, misunderstandings, and countless challenges. But we've also experienced profound love, forgiveness, and growth. That's why we're launching this foundation, to help others find the acceptance and love we found. As applause filled the room, Emma felt a sense of peace wash over her. The journey had been long and often painful, but it had led them here, to a place of love, acceptance, and new beginnings. Later that night, as they all gathered for a family dinner to celebrate the foundation's launch, Emma took a moment to appreciate how far they'd come. Michael caught her eye from across the table and smiled, understanding in his gaze. You okay? He mouthed silently. Emma nodded, smiling back. More than okay, she whispered. As they ate, laughed, and shared stories, Emma marveled at the family they'd created. It wasn't conventional by any means, but it was theirs, and it was beautiful. Ethan, noticing his mother's contemplative mood, raised his glass. I'd like to make a toast, he announced, his voice cracking slightly with emotion. Everyone fell silent, turning to the young man who had grown so much over the past year. To family, Ethan said, his eyes shining. Not just the one we're born into, but the one we choose. The one we build through love, forgiveness, and understanding. To all of us. To family, everyone echoed, their glasses clinking in unison. In that moment, Emma knew that whatever challenges the future held, they would face them together. Their bond, forged through adversity and strengthened by love, was unbreakable. As the evening wound down, Emma found herself alone in the kitchen with Sophie. The young girl hugged her tightly, catching Emma by surprise. "Thank you," Sophie whispered. Emma pulled back slightly, looking into Sophie's eyes. "For what, sweetheart?" Sophie smiled, her eyes wise beyond her years. "For forgiving Dad, for letting us be a family, for making us whole." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. She hugged Sophie back, overwhelmed by the love she felt for this child who had brought them all together. Later, as Emma prepared to leave, Michael walked her to her car. The night was clear, stars twinkling overhead. "You know," Michael said, his voice thoughtful, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad things happened the way they did. Not the pain we caused, of course, but it led us here." Emma nodded, understanding completely. "Me too. We had to break apart to come back together stronger." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in thought. "Emma?" Michael said softly, turning to face her. "I know we said we'd take things slow, but I love you. I never stopped loving you. And I promise, if you'll have me, I'll spend the rest of my life making up for the pain I caused." Emma felt her heart race. She looked into Michael's eyes, seeing the sincerity, the love, and the hope reflected there. Slowly, she leaned in, pressing her lips to his in a soft, tender kiss. When they parted, both were smiling. "I love you too," Emma whispered. "Let's build this future together." As Emma drove home, Ethan sleeping peacefully in the passenger seat, she felt a sense of completeness she'd never experienced before. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was bright with possibilities, and Emma was ready to embrace every moment of it, surrounded by the love of her beautifully unconventional family. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear which character you connected with the most, or what moments made you cry. And if you want more heartwarming tales like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Remember, family isn't always about blood. It's about who loves you unconditionally and stands by you through life's toughest storms.